Hey, folks. Happy New Year. Welcome 2022, third year of the Panini. My name is Nick Taylor. I'm a lead software engineer at Forum. Forum is the software that powers dev.
I'm Christina Gorton. I'm the developer advocate at Forum, and today we have another developer advocate with us, but from Stepson, we have Anthony Campolo. So, Anthony, tell us about yourself a little before we talk about Stepson.
Hello, everyone. Super happy to be here. I've watched this stream a bunch, actually. I'm really a big fan of dev in general, as a company and big advocate of open source technology. And Lucia has been on this stream, also one of my coworkers. So it's really great to be here. And I am a developer advocate at Stepson. I'm going to be showing you what Stepson is. It's a tool for creating GraphQL APIs on any data source. So in this example, we're going to be using the dev API to build out like a whole kind of content mesh type thing where you can just pull in anything you want with any sort of GraphQL queries, because the dev API is a REST API, and we have something called the StepZen Studio, which will make it really easy to hook into that and get going and writing some queries really quickly. So I think it's going to be really fun, and looking forward to it.
Oh,
Awesome.
cool. Yeah. Yeah, I'm super excited to kind of work with all this stuff. We were talking just before the stream how I was using dev as my blog data source, and due to some recent deprecations, I need to actually implement it again. So this is probably a good way for me to get something up for my blog. So yeah, super excited to have you here. We'll be talking some GraphQL too. I know I can't speak for Christina, but I know I don't have tons of GraphQL experience. Me, it's been more Hello World stuff, and when I had a Gatsby blog, just mainly queries in there. So
Mhm.
yeah, I'm excited to dig into all this, and also just digging into the Dev API. I'll drop Christina or me will drop a link to the Dev2 API, so if folks can kind of take a
Mhm.
peek at that while we get started here. So yeah, I guess yeah. Where do you want to start exactly? Do you want to maybe talk a bit about GraphQL first? Maybe why would somebody want GraphQL to begin with? I think that's a
Yeah,
good
yeah,
starting point.
definitely. GraphQL is something that is fairly well known as like this new kind of hyped up technology. So I think most devs these days will have heard of GraphQL, but in terms of using it, it kind of varies depending on your experience with different frameworks and tools and what sort of like APIs you're working with. And for me, I got into GraphQL originally through Redwood.js, which is a full
Okay.
stack React framework that is integrated with GraphQL as like the way that the front end and the back end talk to each other. And this is really interesting because the high level description of what GraphQL is that it's a query language for APIs. And what that
Okay.
means is SQL is a query language for databases, for relational databases specifically. But you can, if you think about an API, it's much more general than that because it could be any sort of data source that can be in any structure and that can be accessed in sort of any way. So when you're working with just
Yeah.
like a wide range of different APIs, you have REST APIs and you're pulling from different REST APIs, you're trying to integrate them into this one project, it can get really complicated because you have a lot of different conventions based on whose API you're working with. And
Mhm.
Mhm.
GraphQL, to standardize it, it has a specific query language and conventions around how to work with it. And the reason that they created it was to basically match the mental model of the front end developers. And this is
Mhm.
why it's really cool to work with because the queries are as simple as you could possibly make them. Like when you
Mhm.
see how you write GraphQL queries, you basically say, this is the thing, I want this object and I want these specific fields on that object, and then it just gives you
Okay.
that data. So we'll actually we'll be working with lots and lots of queries today, so we'll get into more of what that kind of means. But that's like kind of my high level like description of what it is and why it was created and why it's useful.
Yeah. No.
I really
Cool.
like
Cool.
that because, for, like Nick said, like I haven't worked with it a ton, but when I have worked with it, I haven't been intimidated by it as much as like say when I was first learning how to like use REST APIs and stuff. Because just like you said, I feel like it does kind of cater to the way front end developers think, and they make it really easy to do those queries. So that's really cool that was their intention.
Yeah. I do have a question about it though, like because we're talking front end centric here at the moment, but it's not just a front end centric thing. Like obviously, it does make things simpler for someone working in the front end because they can just say hit this endpoint, make some query. I mean, some aggregated kind of query. But I mean, this is something that's like production ready use, like there's back end APIs all over the place. It's not just for front ends, right?
Yeah, so this is a really important distinction to make, which is that it is meant to enable front end developers to be able to do more without necessarily having to constantly bring in the back end developers to create more bespoke endpoints for them. But it is not a front end technology, it is a full stack technology. And this is why I was
Yeah.
saying that Redwood.js is what got me involved in it, because Redwood.js is the idea that you'll have a project with two basically things in it, your front end and your back end. And so you have a web folder, which is basically like a React app, any sort of React app you've ever worked with. And then the back end is a GraphQL API. And the GraphQL API connects to an ORM, which then can connect to a Postgres database. But you create both of those simultaneously. You create a schema on the back end and you create queries on the front end. And what's great about the GraphQL Studio that I'm going to be showing today is that the schemas are already made for you, and the endpoints are already connected for you, so they're already set up where you can just start writing queries. And
Mhm.
this is because people already figured out how to integrate those different REST APIs and write the schemas for you. But the backend is still there, and if you want to tweak it and if you want to change your schema, you can also do that. And if you want to add in more other endpoints, like if you think, okay, well, this is cool, but I also have like photos in like Cloudinary, and I want to like be able to bring those in too. And I also have, maybe I have like a second blog over on WordPress
Mhm.
just because it's been a while and I don't want to get rid of it. So you want to pull in two blogs and combine them into one thing. You can do that as well with StepZen. So it's kind of when people talk about like the front of the front end and the back of the front end, that's become like a kind of big term, which is like the front of the front end is like your HTML and CSS, and the back of the front end is like your JavaScript kind of data fetching, stuff like that. There's a similar thing now with the back end. You have the front of the back end and the back of the back end. And so the back of the back end is where the data
Yeah, yeah.
actually is. That's the database. That's like the data living in dev. And then the front of the back end is the StepZen. It's this gateway into all of this back end stuff. So StepZen is a back end technology, but it's a back end technology that's meant to enable front end developers.
Yeah, I just dropped. There's a great blog post from Brad Frost who talks about this. You're the front end of the front end or the back end of the front end and so on. So just pop that in there for folks that are interested. Uh, I think even though I don't have a ton of experience with GraphQL, I see there being other great uses of it. So like for example, when we're using a Gatsby blog, or Gatsby. Not It's not a blog. You're reading in these markdown as as data sources, and just being able to query them. I think that's pretty powerful. So like, yes, you can have these dynamic pieces of information coming in, like you're saying, like from Cloudinary or other APIs, but you can also include static data, and like for the person consuming the GraphQL endpoint, that's completely transparent to them. So I think it's kind of neat in that sense. Um, and one thing that I've heard people say before though is like, well, it just sounds like it's open season, like I can just open GraphQL and just say give me whatever I want without any restrictions. But from what I've read, just like other kinds of mechanisms and like REST or whatever, it's just because GraphQL can provide all of this, it doesn't mean you'll necessarily get access to it, because you can still limit who sees what and so on. Like I'm assuming through the schemas or some kind of authentication mechanism.
Yeah, you can't throw away auth like just wholesale. And when you first build, like when you naively build a GraphQL API and you just like throw it up online, it will be kind of open by default. But there's many authentication mechanisms that are built in. Actually, StepZen itself is giving you a layer of security in that to access your GraphQL API that you create on StepZen, you have API keys. And so once we build out the front end in this example project, we'll kind of show how to do that. So you are going to have your own basically locked down API that you build with
Okay.
StepsIn, and then those connect themselves to APIs that have their own keys. So you have keys to access the backends through your gateway, and then you have keys to access your gateway. So there's already 2 levels of security that are going to be built in. Then you can also do more fine-grained role-based access control with like directives and things like that, which is like way beyond the scope of what we'll be talking about today. But yeah, that's a whole other world and universe of GraphQL. Yeah.
Cool. All right. So I say, why don't we just jump in and start building something then?
Yep.
Yeah, sounds good. So I will go ahead and share my screen. So I want.
If anyone has questions in the chat as we're going along, feel free to put them in the chat. We'll answer them as we can. So keep that in mind.
Cool. All right.
Yeah, I'm not seeing the chat right now, but definitely happy to
We will
answer any
throw the
questions
at you, so you don't have to.
Yeah.
All right, so this is the StepSen GraphQL Studio. So it's just graphql.stepzen.com. And this is a bunch of pre-made schemas and connections to APIs. So if we see this list, we have things like Airtable, and then Contentful, like CMSs, and then we have like all sorts of different APIs for like Google, like natural language API, GitHub API. Then you have like things like the JSON placeholder API if you want like some quick mock data. Things like SendGrid,
cool.
Slack, Spotify, Twitter, and then there's also pre-made combinations of different ones already put together for you. So like the developer publishing pack already gives you Dev, GitHub, and Twitter all integrated together.
That's cool.
Or like Google Maps and Yelp kind of integrated together. And the one I'll start with will be Dev. And so when you add a schema in, it's going to ask you for your keys. And so this is what I was talking about in terms of like putting the keys in.
Yeah. And for people that are curious, if you are using the Dev2 API, okay, yeah, you're showing us. Okay, perfect.
Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah. So if you go to your Dev account here and you go to settings and account, then you can find your keys. So I have one that I've been using, and then I created a new one for this stream specifically. And I'm going to hop off screen to do this.
And but before we continue, I just have to give a shout out to one of those APIs that were integrated. I saw there. It said Frankfurter API. I'm assuming that's the hot dog API.
Yeah, it must be.
Sorry, that just made me giggle.
Nice. Wait.
So Anthony is actually doing what I didn't do when we had Andrew Brown on talking about Terraform. I exposed my API keys twice during that stream, which
I've done it so many times. I got you beat on this one. I was on a stream and I needed to send API keys to the host, and I copy pasted it and I had it on my clipboard. And then I didn't realize that because I thought I still had a link on my clipboard. I tried to post in a chat, and I posted my API keys into the chat.
Nice.
Yeah, nice. I guess in my case, it would have been a little harder. They would have had to memorize what was on the screen, but still. But yeah. Yeah, good times, good times.
Back on screen. Okay, so once you grab your dev key, then close that, and then you put it in here. So you just click the configure button, and then it says what's your dev key, put it in, and then you hit save. And so now we're already configured and ready to go. And so we're gonna just do like a test query here. And the way you can figure out kind of how to write a query is you can look at the docs, which are gonna be over here. And there's actually a kind of easier, even simpler way to get started though, which is just hold Control and hit space. And then you'll get to see all of the different things that are available to you. So the first one I want to start with will be just getting myself. So I want to get my information from my dev account. So I'm going to do get user, and then this is going to, I think, have some specific. So I'm just grabbing, I have a couple kind of queries already written. I'll should be grabbing.
You probably know these queries better than me. I've barely used the Dev2 API myself.
Yeah, well, so these are going to be the GraphQL queries that are going to be already connected to it. So for GraphQL queries, you have basically like arguments that you can put in. So we're doing a get user query, and then we're feeding it like basically how we're going to get it. So you can do it by like you have like a user ID and things like that. But then you also have like your just username itself. So we're going to be searching by my username, and then let me just start by grabbing these ones first off. So this is going to give back the name, a summary, and then the GitHub username, location, and then profile image. And then, that's right. So later on, I'm going to take this schema and slightly change it. So I took the prefix off of it.
Okay.
And
to be clear, just to be clear here, so like dev2_get_user, that's one of the built-in queries of the schema that ships in StepZen, right?
So if we click here, you will actually see your schema. So when I was doing the control space to do the autocomplete, it introspects your schema. So this is one of the things that makes GraphQL really nice, the developer tooling that goes along with it, because we have all of our types here already. So for someone who's like really into typing and stuff like that, and like the autocomplete and the introspection, like error handling and stuff like that you get from types, you get that with GraphQL. And so this is like a whole schema. It's pretty built out already. We're not going to use this entire schema, but it's here for you if you want to use it. And then you can find the queries in there. So get user. So this is that actual query that we ran. So you see you have to give the ID and the URL, and then this @rest directive. This is where the steps and magic is happening. This is the really key. This one line here is doing so much heavy lifting for you. It's like really hard to like emphasize how much is being done for you right here. This is allowing you to not have to write an entire Apollo server like resolver setup to do this translation for you, because we're taking this endpoint here, which we can check out if we just go do this. Then whoops, so I already had the dev API open over here actually. So you actually want to talk just a little bit about the dev API for anyone who isn't familiar with it?
Yeah, so so folks familiar with Dev2, we also have an API, and this allows you to do many things. You can query your own data, other people's data through a REST API. You can do really cool stuff, like you can actually publish an article through the API. There's, I think it's somebody on the Azure team created, I can't remember the name of the site, but they have I think it's a browser extension that allows you to schedule posts, because that's something that we don't have in Dev or in Forum instances. So yeah, you can basically build so many cool things on top of this. And I know there's definitely other companies that use this too. Like I think Daily Dev does. Hashnode must, because they allow you to import dev articles. So there's and even though it's deprecated now, there was that StackBit integration which was using it. And I know there's just a ton of people using it, and it's definitely what I have to do for my blog now, because there's no way I'm switching up my blog now. I just gotta get that working again.
Nice. Yeah. So this is what makes the studio really nice, is that we're already set up to write queries really quickly, because we're able to just kind of input our key and then start writing queries based on the schema we have. And then you can actually export it if you want. So we have an endpoint here already, and then we can actually do the same query over here, and then we can get it back. And so if we wanted to then integrate this into a project, we can do that, and we can also publish it as well. So if you wanted to just download it into a zip file and open it up, then you'll have this whole StepZen project already made for you. And so before the studio exists, because the studio's only been around for like a couple months, and the way you would use StepZen, kind of quote unquote normally just like as a project you would have this thing here, which is gives you like a single index.graphql file that then hooks into other schemas. And this is the dev schema. So it took that exact schema we already had and then it exported it for us. And then now we also have a couple of those sample queries already written for us. You may recognize this. That's a Lucia.
Yeah, Lucia just popped in the chat actually. She's talking old school XML with Matt from Open Source.
Oh, cool. Oh, what's up, Matt? All right, so questions so far on all that?
No, I like just how quickly you were able to do this.
Yeah.
I guess because I feel like in the past this would have been not necessarily a difficult task if you were familiar with GraphQL, but probably take a lot longer. But yeah, I guess I have some questions about the StepZen Studio itself. So I imagine like where you're creating the queries right now, that's like, is that's built on top of the GraphQL. I don't know if I'm saying that right. I always call it GraphQL, but
yeah, well, yeah, graphical is usually how people
graphical.
pronounce it. So this is the thing you would usually think of. This is built on you see it right here up in the top left, graphical. This is the open source graphical thing right now. The StepZen Studio is an entirely new product that was created from the ground up by the StepZen team, and there's similar things that are built out for other GraphQL services like Hasura and Apollo. They have like their own kind of built out, dashboards and ways of querying, but this is the only one that integrates all these APIs for you. So that is really like the key special sauce that is built in here already, is all of these API integrations and the pre-made schemas already and the configuration to figure out how to authenticate into them. That's not something you're going to be able to get anywhere else.
Yeah. I know we're not going to do it now because we're working with the Dev2 API today, but like I see on the bottom there, connect your own data source. So I imagine you can bring in whatever you want in there. So you can create your own templates, I guess, as well, not just the out of the box ones.
Oh yeah, because it still gives you all the other things that StepZen can do, because when we're integrating these APIs, all we're doing is just taking an API that we already know devs use and enjoy and then building a StepZen schema for that. So if you wanted to go through the process of hooking up something like the dev API, if it hadn't already been made for you, you can do that. And this is like all the example projects I've been building kind of like over this last year as I've been working for StepZen is basically like integrating all this stuff. Like done Fauna, I've done Storyblock, I've done Prismic, I've done like Supabase, I've done a ton, and I've even done ones where I will create a Redwood project that has a GraphQL API, deploy that API to a Netlify function, and then take that Netlify function endpoint and stick that into a StepZen schema.
Okay. So it's really like Lego mishmash, do whatever you want, pretty much, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, exactly. So a couple other queries that I want to show. So this one will be to get articles, which will be, and I'm gonna keep forgetting to do that. And so this is gonna give me back all my Dev2 articles, and you can specify how much per page you want to do. So if I want to just do 3 per page, I can get my last 3 articles here. So we have a crypto one. We got a Astro. If anyone knows Astro, and then how to connect Next.js front end to your Redwood API. And we get things like the title, the description, you can get the date in different formats. If you wanted to, let's see, it's published at. So you can get the actual date time here, or you can get something that you want to actually put on like your blog that is easier to read. And then we get the image, cover image right here. And then you get the tags, and you can get the tags in an array instead. You get the slug. So if you want to, what we'll be doing with the blog, you can take the URL and then have like links to the actual thing from the thing itself. So yeah, this is, and then if you want to just like get everything, like all of my posts, then you can do that. And
Yeah, no, that's cool. And again, just this super fast getting this all up and running, which is pretty
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. And then I also, because I am a big podcaster, you can get even my podcasts through the Dev API, which is gonna be got 60 FS Jam episodes.
Okay.
Nice.
See lots of jam.
Yeah, always jamming. All right, cool. Do either of you know anything about Sveltkit?
I haven't used Sveltkit. Swix was on the stream last year, and he was just kind of, we were talking about his book, but he was also talking about Svelte, but it was just pure Svelte at that point, not Sveltkit.
Mhm.
Is this kind of like equivalent to like a Next.js or like a Redwood? Like it's a meta framework or?
Yeah, so it's definitely very similar to Next.js. The idea being, so it's a Svelte meta framework. And so what Next does for React, adding things like server-side rendering, static generation, and all
Okay.
that kind of stuff, Sveltkit does that for Svelte. And it's uses Vite as well, which is kind of this like new like bundler, it's kind of like our Webpack replacement. And it's a really cool tool, and it's a great way to connect to StepZen actually, because it gives you kind of like functions out of the box really easily. And so we're gonna create like a StepZen Sveltkit project, and we're
Nice.
going to use the dev queries that we've been writing to do that. And because the thing that I like about the studio is it makes it really easy for someone to get going really quickly, and they can like write
Mhm.
their queries and then figure out what day they want to get back, and then they can work backwards from the queries. So they can take the queries, then they can say, okay, well, I only need these parts of the schema that I've been using, so I can bring in parts of the schema, and then at the end you'll have a project with just the schema you want and just the queries you want, and then you can bring that into your
Okay.
front end very easily.
Ah, that's cool.
Let me just make sure this is set up and going. Oh, I think I didn't. Oh, wait, no.
Yeah, I still haven't messed around with Svelte, but when from what I've seen a couple videos about it, and when Sean was talking about it, it's kind of neat how they go with the approach of compiling away versus kind of like React or other frameworks where it's just like reevaluating these things like through the renders. It's just kind of interesting.
Okay, so now we're set up and going with our Svelte project here. So I just did the really bare bones boilerplate one instead of like the whole kind of demo app. And we
Yeah.
have an SRC folder with a route, and the route is to index.svelte. And if we wanted to
Cool.
create another one, we would say new route.svelte and say ooh. And then we would go over to / new route, and we got our new route already. So it's set up for single page app, multi-page app, kind of whatever you want to do. And it also gives you really easy way to hook into your endpoint. But before we get to that, I got a couple other things I need to connect. So we're gonna have a config.yaml file,
Okay.
and this is the first part of StepZen connecting to your backend, and then we're going to connect to
Okay.
StepZen after this. But first, what we're going to do is we're going to put our dev2 API key here. So I'm going to hop off again.
Yeah, don't show us
It's
that.
the same key that I inputted in the beginning into the StepZen studio. So okay, that's not what I want. This.
It's a big screen for a
And
sec.
all right, we're back.
Cool. All right, let's do this. Cool.
Okay, and so over here in our actual StepZen project, this is the index.graphql that is going to combine all of our schema files together, because what I did is we had just like one file with the entire dev2 schema in it, and I broke it up into a couple just kind of separate concerns. These should be fairly intuitive. They're just based on the naming of the dev2 API. You can get user information, articles, followers, comments, organizations, and organization information, and then podcasts. And then each of these will live inside our schema folder here. So we're going to grab this. And so this is going to create a type for the dev2 user. And then we have things like GitHub username and joined at and location. Those are type string. And then ID is type int. And then we have the get user query, which takes in the ID and the URL. And sorry about the noise outside. I think it might be trash container.
I know worries. Construction, pandemic, anything goes in 2022, so don't sweat it. I was going to ask you about the schema there, because I've done a ton of TypeScript, and I can't remember if the exclamation mark means optional in GraphQL, or does it mean it's mandatory?
So it means it's mandatory. Basically, that's non-nullable is the term. So if you don't get back one of these fields, then it throws an error. And I think I'm actually gonna take those.
Actually, I gotta correct myself. It's a question mark in TypeScript for optional. Sorry.
Yeah. So you then, to actually get this deployed, actually one more thing to show. We have our steps and config here, which is going to set our URL for the endpoint, and then you need to tell it if you don't have your index.graphql in the root, then you tell it where it is. So the root is in StepZen. So what I've done is I basically integrated the StepZen stuff and the Sveltkit stuff, so they just kind of live both in the same repo. It's kind of like a mono repo setup. So you can run in one terminal your Svelte project, and that'll be on localhost 3000. And then your StepZen one kicks off on 5001. It used to be 5000, but then Monterey comes with a built-in thing running on 5000.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. And then here now we have the Explorer, and so we can get the user AJC web dev and get information back. Okay, let me check that out. So, I think it's because I'm not giving the ID.
I think there's two arguments. You have to say by username as well.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, so now this is querying the StepZen API that we just spun up. And so we were able to basically take the same schema and the same queries, and then the only thing I had changed was I took off the prefix, because once it's the prefixes are partly so if you wanted to get users from two different backends, you don't want to just have get user as a query, because then you'll have name collisions across these different APIs that you're using. But if you're just doing a project where you're just using this dev2 API, then you don't really need the prefixes. So I took it off because it's kind of like just additional noise in your code that's not really necessary.
Gotcha. Yeah. And can you do aliases or no?
Yeah, you can. So you do a colon and create the alias, something like that. I forget the specific syntax to do because I don't do it very often, but that's a thing. You remember actually when I was showing Alex Trost on a stream, he did, and I was like, oh, you can. I guess you can do that.
Yeah. I think I saw Alex pop in the chat here.
Oh, nice. Okay, so now we're going to show how to actually connect to the API in Sveltkit. And so what we're going to do is we're going to create, instead of a Svelte file, we're going to create just a user.json.js file. And then what this is going to do is this is going to allow us to actually do a fetch in our project. So we're creating an async function that's going to await a fetch call, and then we're going to get the data and then just return the data. And we're also going to put in our steps and keys over here. And so I will hop off one more time to do that.
Yeah.
This will be the last time I had to do that. And this will take just a quick second. So if you want to ask any questions or do any of that,
I'm gonna swing Jay Tompkins Sloan across the screen while we're doing this. Sorry, I've been meaning to use that. Yeah, no, I mean, again, it's pretty neat how you're just able to get up and running really quick. Like, I mean, I know you've probably done this a few times, but yeah. Oh, Ben Myers is saying he loved the the atrocious sloth going across the screen.
Awesome. Yeah, what's up, Ben? Thanks for hanging out. Yeah, so like you said, I've already done this, and this is like a project that I already kind of built out. But even as I was like building it, I was kind of amazed how quickly I was able to get everything going, and it's partly just because there's like a lot of different tools you have to learn and different technologies you have to learn to be able to move really fast with this stuff. So it's like
Yeah,
partly there is a bit of a learning curve to it, but once you kind of get the conventions, the different things you're working with, everything is very like unified in a way that is like very, very cool.
awesome.
Okay, I think let me just actually test this real quick. Make sure it works. Okay. That makes sense. That makes sense.
We don't have a sponsor, so I'll say this stream is currently sponsored by nobody, and I will drink some coffee.
Sponsored by nothing and nobody.
Yeah.
Okay, great. That does work. Excellent.
I think my brain's still on vacation mode. First day back at work, so.
Yeah. Hope everyone else had a good vacation if you took time off. And if not, you
Yeah.
should take some time off.
Most definitely take time off. All right, cool. We're back
Okay.
here. No
All right,
private
so
keys were shared. All right.
now what we got going on here, this is, if you've ever written a fetch call, should be pretty comprehensible, and especially if you've ever written a GraphQL fetch call. One of the cool things about GraphQL is that it's not really dependent on any specific technology because it is a query language for APIs. So people will frequently use Apollo to make GraphQL queries, or they'll use a library like GraphQL Request, or they may combine something like React Query with one of those things. And you actually don't need to do that at all. You can just make a fetch call, and what you do is all you have to do is tell it the content type is application JSON. There may or may not be an authorization header. So for some, like the Rick and Morty API, you wouldn't even need an auth header. And then you have the body that you JSON.stringify, and then you input a query, and then the actual query itself. So with the backticks is where the query starts that we wrote over here. And so if we were to get rid of that name there and just do that, it still works. So you have just the query is inside those brackets, and then that gets set to query, which then gets set to body. So then this is like a JSON object where you have the key is query, and the value is the query itself.
In terms of the query name there, because you removed it, is it typically if you're doing GraphQL, will you omit a query name like you have here? And
I like to have query names be for a couple of reasons, because it's great, because this is the get user query is a general thing. Like I could be getting any kind of user depending on what's being fed into this URL. So right now I want to be more specific, saying this query is going to get AJC web dev, because that's what it's hard coded in there. So if it's like a query like that is always going to do the same thing, then I would like to give it a more specific name. But then also you need to have a name for it if you actually want to pass in query parameters. So if you were going to do
gotcha.
This thing and that thing, and then you change that to that thing, and then you could actually pass in these instead of just hard coding it in.
Okay, cool. I have a question about the. I'm kind of derailing your thing here a bit, but when you when you specify the query parameters there, does GraphQL under the hood handle like for example, if you're doing SQL typically use parameters to avoid SQL injection and stuff. Does like I don't know if there's a concept of I feel like there's probably some kind of GraphQL injection attack too. Like is that
Well, this
mitigated
is the
by
thing though,
GraphQL itself or
because a GraphQL endpoint has to be like publicly exposed at some point, it basically makes you think about things like injection basically from the very beginning. So this is when I was talking about all this stuff
okay.
about authenticating it, securing it. That's because by definition you're exposing this thing that people get like chuck queries into. So it's like it's already
Yeah, yeah.
you have to think about the injection problem like from day one.
Okay. Cool, cool.
Yeah. Yeah, and so that's already kind of like thought about here because we're kind of locking it down from the perspective of like the dev part because we're authenticating through the dev one, but then we're also now authenticating through StepZen as well. So the
Okay, I gotcha.
keys we're putting in the endpoint. So the endpoint we got from here because when we deployed this, whoops, it actually sets it up on an endpoint. It's something that can confuse people at the beginning. They see this localhost 5000, they think like, oh, this is a like my endpoint is like running on localhost, but this is a way to query your actual endpoint, which is living on this URL right
Okay.
here, and that is what we're inputting into then our Svelte project through this, and then in our actual Svelte component we then use this load function. So this is the kind of the Sveltkit part, which is specific to Sveltkit, which is this specific load function, which basically lets you fetch from this endpoint in your project that you're kind of creating. And then you get the data back and you do data dot get user, the query name, and then whatever thing you want from the query name. So I'm getting name, I'm getting my GitHub username, I'm getting my location, summary, and then an image, set to an image tag. And that's running over here.
Okay, and just one more question. So you're fetching user.json, so that means that uh, that's a serverless function that's in user.json.js, I imagine, because you have your API keys there and stuff. That's not exposed to the client.
Yeah, exactly. That's the whole idea of why this is set up the way it is, so that you can just have that there, and then you're able to query it. And if then we open our developer tools, and if we check like our network request, we're not going to see any GraphQL query here, which is what would happen if you were doing it from the client. You could see that the query would like say XML, or and then you can click it and then you can see the query in itself. But these are all just JavaScript files.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I guess I was just asking because it looks like at least in Sveltkit, like the routes and the functions they're all just in the same place, I guess.
Yeah, you can set up I think other folders to kind of actually I'm not sure if you can nest it or not, because for me like the simplicity of it is kind of what appeals to me in the beginning, so I haven't tried to like configure it to do all sorts of other crazy stuff yet. But you basically just like do the route and then do a Svelte file for the route that will actually be in your project, and then you can just start doing it. So yeah.
Cool.
All right, and so I'm gonna grab a couple more things here. So now we're gonna pull in our articles, and we're gonna put those over here, and articles, and then when you save, it will redeploy your thing over here. So let me do that.
So I guess when you're saying it's redeploying here, there's like a bridge between the actual API and your local environment when you're running localhost 5000.
So yeah, so this is what I mean about the API is not running on localhost 5000. The API is here. So every time, and this is then you have like a dev server that is watching your project. So whenever you save something and make a change to your schema, it automatically notices the change and then redeploys your API, so that this now endpoint has this part now. So if I go back here, and if we check the Explorer, we see nothing has changed here because you have to refresh. So you refresh, and now we see those extra ones there.
Okay.
And so to get the articles, we had this query here, and then that's good. So now this is running through our StepZen API, which then means it's already connected in our Svelte project. So we can build out another Svelte route to very quickly get that going. So we have in articles.json. So this is going to look very similar to the other thing we were just looking at, because we got a slightly different query now, which is going to be the get articles, but everything else is the same, still a fetch call, same keys, all of that. So this will be articles.json.js, and then this will be articles.svelte. And for anyone who hasn't seen Svelte before, it's basically like a single file component. So if you've used Vue before, it's kind of like that. We have basically a script, this is the JavaScript part on top, and then we have the HTML part down here, which is basically like you can do a component with like some Svelte syntax. So we're doing so this is like a loop right here that's going to loop over the articles and then pull out title, description, and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, gotcha.
Oh, nice. So it's giving me an accessibility warning right here. Okay, so now nothing's changing here as we're over on articles. And then this is now our articles page, because it's pulling in the articles query here, and then we're looping over it here, and then we're setting the title to an H2, and we're putting that inside of a link. We're using the slug to link to the actual link of the article, and then we're getting the publish date and tags, and then the cover image and the description. So if we click this link, it'll take us to the actual thing. So right now we're already pulling in all of my blog articles, which is pretty cool.
Go read Anthony's articles.
And then let's pull in a couple more of these. So I also had podcasts. So we got podcasts here. It is the FS Jam podcast, and we got a couple listeners in the chat. And let's see, this will be podcasts.json. Yes. And then we'll do podcasts.svelte.
Oh yeah. Matt Foley's asking. He kind of wanted to make, like the old school word tags, like you used to have it on blogs. I don't know if people still do that. He was looking to do that with some dev2 tags, so that could be something interesting. I don't know if we'll have time for that or if it's in the scope of what we can do, but just throwing that out there.
So one more time what about the tags?
So there's like it's like a component. Like I used to see it all the time in WordPress blogs. You'd have like a word cloud in it. So like something that had more relevance would be larger, for example. But so Matt was suggesting, hey, maybe we can pull in tags, potentially tags for your own blog posts, I guess. And you could weigh them and change like the font size for example. We might
totally.
We don't necessarily have to do all that.
So we're pulling in the tags from them right here. So we do have that set as a specific field on our schema. And then there's ways to like basically aggregate those together. So that is the thing we do. Take more time to build. I've got time for it right now, but that's something that you can start. You can actually, with this API, you could even start doing analytics, because you're getting things like follower counts. You're getting things like number of likes for posts. So you have access to everything that's in the dev API. And so anything that you want to pull in, and any way you want to manipulate it, and any way you want to sort it, and any way you want to display that data, all of that is there, like ready to be basically done. Like it's all the data is at your fingertips. It's just about like how do you want to display it and how do you want to be able to work with it. But if you know how to use GraphQL, you already know all those things. You just got to translate that into queries on your front end.
Cool. There you go, Matt. I expect that to be on my desk tomorrow morning.
Yeah, so I had jumped ahead and I built out the Svelte front end part before getting the schema part actually created. And then this is now pulling in all of our podcasts. So
Okay.
the dev API only gives you the title and the link. So you guys should give some more podcast stuff. That would be cool.
Gotcha.
Okay, and then let's see. So one thing that I actually did do, the rest is going to be pretty much similar stuff to what I've already been showing, but something else that I wanted to do is make the front end a little nicer in terms of like pulling in different parts. So
Okay.
it was here. Yeah, so I'm going to modify the user endpoint a little bit. And
Okay.
instead of just getting the user, I'm going to get the user, and then I'm going to get my last 5 articles and my last 5 podcast episodes. So this would be like, if you want to have your front page just show like, okay, these are the most recent things that I've done. That's the idea there. And then pull this whole thing and so now we still are grabbing that user stuff, but then we're also grabbing the articles and displaying them, and then podcasts and displaying them. And then we go back to our homepage. And so we got all that, and you see most recent articles and most recent podcasts.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Cool.
I'm not sure if we have it in the Dev2 API, but like there's this concept of being able to pin posts if you go to your profile on Dev. I imagine I'm not sure how it's surfaced in the API if it is, but maybe it's a property on the article. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'd have to check it out. The last thing that I want to show is just how easy it is to then deploy this now. So we've got these adapters already with Sveltkit, and this is going to let you hook into different deployment platforms. And so that could be Netlify, Vercel, Cloudflare Workers, Begin, and there's probably some others that I'm forgetting. So there's a lot of ways to hook in. Here's the actual adapters page. And then you just do a node server as well. That's the other one. And then yeah, just get it on a Git repo. So we're gonna git init. And if we notice here in our git ignore, we have our .env, and then what we don't have though, and what we really want is we want our config.yaml as well. So you don't want to git commit your config.yaml. So always make sure that's in your git ignore. And then I love repo.new. Create repo. And then as soon as you get it on a repo, you then just need to, oh yeah, I think I skipped a step. There's also netlify.toml that will tell it the build commands. So this is just so you don't have to input it into the Netlify dashboard. It actually will auto detect these build commands.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay, we'll do that. And then you just gotta connect your Netlify account to your GitHub repo. And then it puts in the build commands for you. And then I'm also going to have to give it my steps and keys.
Oh, I mean upload them to Netlify.
Yeah, so this will be those environment variables that I had set, which is the endpoint and the Netlify or the StepsN API key, that's what's happening in the fetch request.
Cool. Yeah, I know you said that you need to learn a bunch of things to be doing all this pretty quickly, but I'm still pretty impressed how fast we're building out something.
Yeah, it's if you're already kind of bought into a lot of the Jamstack stuff, then that's really great, especially for once you just like the deployment part, because deploying this stuff used to be a lot more challenging, but they have such great conventions now, so it just pretty much gets all handled for you.
Cool. And we got a live site.
Yeah, so this deploys really, really quickly because it builds pretty dang quickly. So if we look at the build time, 3 seconds for the build, 1 second for the function bundling, 6 seconds to deploy, like 10-second build altogether. So that's really nice. And then there's our project.
Now we're live on the interweb.
Articles.
Very cool.
And we got podcasts. Yeah.
Awesome.
And then obviously you can start styling it out however you want. I've actually recently discovered this thing, water.css, that I really like, where it'll give you kind of like some CSS presets.
Okay, and so not so much a CSS reset, just like some out of the box styles.
Yeah, it's basically so you don't have to write CSS classes or anything like that. It reads your markdown and then kind of automatically gives you some nice styles to go along with it. There's a lot of these, like MVP CSS. This is the first one that Ben Myers turned me on to, and then he recently switched to Pico, and so these ones are cool because they're the idea is that they push you to write semantic HTML because it makes the semantic HTML look nice. It kind of uses that as like a base convention, builds around. So that's pretty cool.
So if your site looks crappy, it's because we got some div soup going on. All right.
Yeah. So now there's some styling to look just a little bit nicer. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Cool. So that is pretty much the whole demo.
That was awesome.
Super cool. Yeah. No.
Yes, too many kids have decided to be really loud today, but I was listening and learning. And I thought that was really awesome.
Yeah, no, this is super cool. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna have to check this out because I do want to kind of resuscitate my dev2 integration, because right now, like I was telling you, I'm copy pasting my markup from my markdown from dev2 to a markdown file locally, which is 100% not efficient, and it means I have to update it in 2 places too. So yeah, I'm definitely gonna check this out. So in terms of StepsN Studio, like, is there obviously it's a paid product, but I imagine there's some kind of developer tier.
The StepsN Studio is not a paid product. It is totally free. Anyone can go on that endpoint and start using it and do exactly what I just did. No way. You don't even need a StepsN account. So to the part that I showed you with Sveltkit, that requires a StepsN account, which is also free, and that is what lets you then deploy the endpoint. But you can create an endpoint from the StepsN Studio itself without even needing to create an account.
Oh, okay, cool. No, I'm definitely gonna check this out. And I'll probably ping you in OpenSauce or somewhere in one of the many Discords.
Yeah, because I'm obviously a developer advocate for StepsN. Like the whole point is for me to show people this thing, to get people using it, like get them to give me some feedback. And it's been a struggle to make the pitch because it's such a high level thing. It's kind of like you can pull in anything and do anything with anything. It's great, right? And there's like so what
Yeah,
do I do
pull in
with
your
it? And
grandmother's API, pull in your grandpa's API.
yeah,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
but once you kind of like actually get the like what it's for, and you start kind of looking at problems through like a StepZen lens, you start seeing like really the what it's useful for, and it's like
Mhm.
getting projects spun up with a way for people to access data quickly is like such a useful, like badly needed thing just across all sorts of ecosystems. So yeah, if you think there's a problem that you have that could require pulling in data from somewhere and it's complicated and you need like a nicer way to pull in data, like this is the thing to use.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it's definitely cool, and the UI looks pretty slick too. So I, I like the
User
little color
friendly.
coding sidebar. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
awesome. Well, I was gonna say, if folks want to reach out to you, where's the best places to find you on the internet?
Yeah, so I'm AJC Web Dev on Twitter and GitHub and Dev2. So all of those places, I got the same handle. And yeah, feel free. You can just message me on Twitter. Um, that would be probably the easiest way to get in touch with me quickly. And then stepzen.com is where you can learn all about StepZen. And yeah, happy to chat about it or any other projects that people are interested in. I have like a wide ranging interest in many different parts of like the web development ecosystem, both front end and back end. So always happy to chat and give people advice if they're ever like trying to evaluate different pieces of tech or frameworks or what have you. Or if anyone wants to get involved in open source, I'm also like, I didn't really tell my story very much, but I first started in the open source movement with like Redwood, and by doing that is what
Okay.
got me noticed by Not, which was got me the StepZen job in the first place. So in terms of like breaking into tech and how do you do that? Because I used to be a music teacher before I was a
Oh, no
developer.
way.
I've only been a developer
Nice.
for like the last couple of years, and yeah, and I actually went to Lambda school where Christina was teaching at the time.
Ah, well, she's a good teacher. No,
I
that's
try.
very cool. Yeah, awesome. And what was I gonna say? Yeah, it's escaped me. But yeah, I just want to say it's been super fun. It's like I just like how we went from zero to hero in like about an hour with like a full-fledged site. Like obviously you would probably still want to tweak the site, but I think it's just really cool how we were able to grab the Dev2 API or whatever APIs you're going to use, integrate it pretty easily into the StepZen Studio to give you some kind of GraphQL API, and then Svelte or whatever you use for your front end. Yeah, it was just super cool to see it go from 0 to 60. So awesome. Thanks so much, Anthony.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also just want to say that I think if anyone wants to reach out, you should just, he was saying reach out and talk about stuff because, like he said, he was at Lambda not too long ago, a few years ago. He's already in, a developer advocate job, and I think that's really awesome. I know how hard it is to get into a developer advocate job,
Yeah.
and talk to him about open source, talk to him about these things, see, more of his story, and reach out because I think that's really cool. And you're obviously a really good teacher as well, Anthony, as you taught us steps in here.
Yeah,
All
I
right,
do enjoy
now,
teaching. It's been nice.
yeah, for the last part of the stream, we will be doing piano lessons with Anthony.
Hot
Cool,
cross
cool.
buns. I can teach you hot cross buns.
Yeah. Or chopsticks. Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week.